Today we're going to be taking a look at the TTArtisan Light Meter II, a tiny little meter that you can mount on your camera's cold shoe mount that is supposed to be able to quickly give you great exposures, something that is super useful when you're shooting film through a film camera that doesn't have any built-in exposure tools. But is it accurate? Is it quicker than pulling out your phone and using a light meter app? Let's take a look. Now, to start with the very basics, a light meter is essentially a device that measures the amount of light present at a scene in any given location. And there are different types of light meter that you can purchase that work in slightly different ways, but all of them work for the same purpose. And that is to ensure that your camera settings are correct when you're taking a photo, ensuring that the final image that you get is not too dark nor too bright. Most modern day digital cameras, of course, have light meters that are built into their bodies that allow you to shoot in automatic exposure modes, and they work out the correct settings needed to ensure that the correct level of exposure is achieved. However, with a lot of older cameras, and in particular film cameras which I shoot, they don't have light meters built in, and that is where something like this little thing comes in handy. The TTArtisan Light Meter II is obviously the second iteration of small light meters that the company TTArtisan has released, and it brought about some improvements to the original design that is supposed to make the light meter more accurate and easier to use. The original version had some negative reviews that talked a lot about unreliability when using the light meter, resulting in underexposed or overexposed images despite the fact that the meter was saying the image would be well exposed. So this second version added a new convex lens for a stronger light gathering effect, added an extra 11 shutter speeds, totaling to now 23 different shutter speed measurements, ranging from 1/2000th of a second up to 1 second of exposure. And they also added clicked aperture dials, which are more tactile and allow for greater confidence when metering that you haven't accidentally jogged your aperture to a different setting to what you have on your camera lens. The aperture ring spans from an incredibly low f1.0 up to f22. Pretty common apertures for the majority of cameras, but larger format lenses for 4x5 and 8x10 systems can have apertures such as f32 or higher, and you're not going to be able to make those work straight out the box with the Light Meter II. The Light Meter II does have some nice features. Its battery should last an incredibly long time as it powers off automatically after 10 seconds with no inputs, and it goes to sleep fully after 60 seconds with no inputs. It's designed to go on a camera's cold shoe and has 3 different positions which you can install it on: the left, middle, and right of your camera's cold shoe. So that should allow for greater compatibility with a range of cameras. The Light Meter uses a very easily available CR1632 battery, and it comes in an incredibly small little package that also weighs hardly anything at all. You could of course throw this onto a cold shoe as it is designed to be, or simply put it in your pocket to be used handheld, and you'll hardly notice that it's in there. In terms of the process of using the Light Meter II, it really is incredibly easy. There's 3 dials on the top of the meter, one for ISO, one for aperture, and one for shutter speed. First step is to set your ISO of your film, i.e. if you're shooting Portra 400, you can set this ISO ring to be 400 so that it matches the speed of your film. This is super important to ensure that the light meter is spitting out the right settings for the film that you are shooting. I personally would then set the aperture that you think you want to shoot your scene at, and if you're shooting something like landscapes, you're probably going to be in the f5.6 to f11 range for the sharpest images. And so you can go ahead and preset that on the clicked aperture wheel. This will now line up with the shutter speed on the other dial, and that is essentially the exposure setting that the light meter is going to test to see how well exposed it is. From there, all that is left to do is to point your light meter at your subject and press the little button on the back of the meter. The light indicators at the front of the meter will then illuminate, letting you know if your exposure is correct or not, and also how far away from being correct it is. There's a green dot in the middle of the light indicator and then a red plus and minus symbol either side. If just the green dot illuminates, then the light meter is saying that will be a correctly exposed image with those settings. If just the red plus appears, then the image will be overexposed, and if just the red minus appears, then it will be underexposed. If the green dot appears as well as the plus or minus, then it is under or overexposed, but within one stop of being correctly exposed. You then simply rotate the shutter speed dial until the green dot is illuminated. The shutter speed that lines up with your pre-selected aperture that you set are the correct exposure settings for the scene that it has metered. There's also some extra orange lines between the settings either side that you could alternatively use that would give you the same correct exposure if you didn't like the shutter speed or the aperture that you are being given. It's a really rather simple little light meter to use, and I really do like the design. The lights are bright enough for me to use right now in winter in England, but I can imagine that in much brighter conditions and in direct sunlight, they may just be a little harder to read. But for me, I haven't had any issues yet. So is the meter actually accurate? How good is it? Well, I took my Pentax 6.7 and some Delta 100 black and white film out on a shoot to find out. So we've made it out to the first place that we're going to stop, take some photos, and we're going to be testing out this little TTArtisan Light Meter II, which it could be interesting. I am shooting some medium formats. I'm shooting my Pentax 6.7, which obviously doesn't have a light meter built in, and normally when I'm shooting this, I just use my phone. But today we're just going to trust this. We're going to use every exposure for this. I might still use my light meter app on my phone to see, just to see how it compares, see what the differences and stuff are. And I'm going to shoot the exposures that this little light meter says, but I might just see how the phone compares, see if it gives similar sort of results. Always helps when you can get into a little foil packet. Good to go. So something with this sign over here is what I want for my first image, and just going to get something sort of framed up here, take a look, and then we use this little light meter. I mean, this is tiny. It's designed to go obviously in like a hot shoe, so on my Contax G1 it'd be great, could sort of slide in. The Pentax obviously doesn't have that, so I'm just going to have to sort of handhold it, point it in my scene, press the button and see what happens. But there's definitely going to be something in this. I think this could look pretty cool, but let's give this a go. Well, first I just want to show you just how small this thing is. I mean, just showing you this, it's literally tiny. There's obviously just a little exposure thing telling you if you're under or overexposed. The dial's here, and you just point it at your scene like that and press a button and it fires, and we take a look. So let's get our ISO set, and you can see that, but in there it says 100, and obviously we're shooting Delta 100, so that'll be good. So I guess let's fire away at our scene and take a look. Okay, so I'm going to point this pretty much just at my scene. My camera's obviously right next to me. I'm just going to point it here. I've set my ISO that I think I want to shoot at, which is 8. Yeah, I've got it set to 8 on the camera, all good. And I'm going to point it at this scene, see what comes up. And that says underexposed. So if I now dial this wheel, interestingly enough, it's saying that it's underexposed / exposed well, and it's sort of on that brink. And if I then go up one, it says well exposed / overexposed. So I guess we'll go with that one, and we'll lean to that instead, which is f8 at 1/8. Okay, first frame with this light meter, done. Just one thing to note, all of the images that I'm sharing here are the completely unedited exposures. Towards the end of the video, I will add in the edited versions of the images to compare and see how over or underexposed I think this meter is. So interestingly, I mean, almost the same spot, I've just come to more of a off angle, and the light meter is now telling me to shoot it at 1/4 second. But my phone says still shoot it at 1/8, both at f8. So I'm going to listen to the light meter. That's what I said I was going to do. And we'll see if this one comes out, I guess, any different. I actually quite like the scene flipped with this little bike sort of here. There's some nice sort of bright light up in the sky. There we go, up and around here. And I'm intrigued to see how the light meter deals with that, because this is a lot darker and that sky is a lot brighter than it was the other way. So I might just flip around and see what that looks like as well. Saying f8 at 1/8 is too much. If we dial that down, having dialed that down, that's saying f8 at 1/60th is what we're after. I wonder, so if I tilt this down so it's looking more at the floor, that says underexposed. That makes sense. If I point at the sky, it says about right but overexposed. And if I try and just hold it level next to the camera, point in the middle, saying f8 on 60th. So we're going to go with that. That's what we're going to go with. Quickly see what the phone would say for this scene, saying f8 at a 30th. So there's a chance this comes back underexposed. And for this, I might take both and we'll compare. That's a 60th and that's a 30th. Guess we'll see. I think I'm going to move on to somewhere new now though. Let's try and get some different things. So my overall impressions of the TTArtisan's Light Meter II is that it does an okay job at measuring the light in a scene. I do think that on this particular day it struggled just a little bit with the bright overcast skies contrasting with the quite dark subjects that I was taking pictures of. The images that were in the more open areas where light was a little more uniformed, it certainly did a better job. But overall I found that the light meter definitely underexposed the vast majority of the images. If we take a quick look at comparing the unedited scans with what I've edited, we can definitely see that the negatives are too dark and underexposed. For the majority of these images, I edited them to the level that I would like to see the base initial exposure. But for some, I simply tried to get them back to an acceptable level and see how much latitude I could pull out of the underexposed negatives. Now there's certainly steps we can take to help the light meter out, and there's probably some things that I would advise you do when shooting with this light meter. I would probably set the ISO as one stop lower than the film that you're shooting. So this Delta 100 that I shot, I should have set my ISO to the 50 setting on the meter. I also would probably take the exposure settings that are recommended when both the green light and the red plus is illuminated, just to err on the side of overexposure and give myself some extra latitude in the shadows. Interestingly enough though, the meter did often have the same results as a light meter app on my phone, and so the tips of overexposing by a stop or so could relate more to the nature of film and how it handles underexposure more so than it does the efficacy of this little meter. Overall though, a pretty neat and compact little package that is definitely easy to use, simple to carry around and to operate, but maybe not as straightforward and effective with its results. And in reality, that is the main thing that matters. It's supposed to make your life easier. And I think that if I did use this long term going forward, I'd probably be slightly second guessing every exposure that I get out of it. And I'd want to double check it against a secondary meter anyways. But there's definitely not a smaller nor a more compact option out there. That's going to be all for this one. I do hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, please consider leaving me a like, let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below, and please do consider subscribing if you want to see some more of my content. Stay safe, everyone. Stay happy. And I'll see you in the next one.